You need to give your body enough time each night to do its thing. That's why when you don't, you wake up the next day feeling forgetful and moody and all of that.
Right. What if there are things we never had the opportunity to learn? We've all been to school or training, but there are things they never taught us that actually make a powerful difference in life. I'm here to share with you all the pieces you've been missing: mindset, health, success, and more. And we'll all learn together from guests along the way. We may not have learned it the traditional way, but oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do things differently. OMG, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I am excited about this one and also well aware that I say that every time. But don't we all love sleep? We all love sleep, a nap in the afternoon, a good night's sleep, but sometimes it creates issues, right? Sometimes we have trouble sleeping, or maybe we don't even know why we should be sleeping and we give ourselves a guilt trip because we're not sleeping enough. There's all kinds of things going on here. We talked about gut health with Dr. Katie Collier a few weeks ago, and she alluded to sleep and stress reduction as being important. So let's dig in a little bit more to that. So joining me today is Sherry Tripp, and she has gone from crunching numbers as a CPA to diving headfirst into health coaching. So her story is definitely one of transformation, which I love. And she understands the frenzy of our everyday lives. Certainly as a CPA, that would be true, and is on a mission to guide people toward an existence full of energy, free from stress, and bursting with productivity. So she's a certified health coach from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and a Dr. Amen licensed brain trainer. So I am really excited to talk to Sherry today and learn about her holistic approach. And we're going to focus on sleep because, of course, that's a piece of our health. Absolutely. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. This is a powerful topic. So this is going to be a good talk for sure.
Oh, yes, for sure. We definitely need our sleep.
We do. We do. So the first thing is, I always love to hear people's stories. And so tell us a little bit about how you ended up in health coaching.
Yes, I have a very interesting story, at least I think. I've spent most of my career in the financial services industry as a CPA. And, as I continued to move along in my career, get more promotions, ended up leading a team. Each job got a little more stressful, a lot of pressure, longer hours. And I've always really been into health and fitness. And so I was realizing that my health was starting to suffer because I was focusing so much on my career. So me being someone that's I love to learn, I could be a professional student. I enrolled in the health coaching school to first help myself and, see what I could learn. And during the program, I just loved it so much and found such valuable information that I wanted to share it with others. And I felt like it was something that wasn't readily available in my industry. At least I never saw people coming in to do wellness seminars, or anything like that.
Right.
And so I found that there was a need for it and had a real passion for it. So I decided to start my own health coaching business to help others that were in similar situations to myself, and also had a real interest in brain health specifically because I had a history of Alzheimer's in my family with my grandmother and seeing her go through that. And it was really interesting. Once I started to learn more about the brain, I realized how it's involved in everything we do. So it has a direct effect in how we show up every day, in our careers, in our relationships. And sleep is actually a big part of brain health. So that's how I started to dive into sleep specifically as well.
Wow, that's interesting. And I was saying before we started recording that I was sure I was going to say say this again. What I was thinking about when I wanted to do this episode is I don't think very many of us know why we sleep. We know that we need to rest and we're tired, but we don't know why. So yeah, it's fascinating to understand what's going on with the brain and all of that for sure. And I always love it when people sort of take a path that is because of something you really cared about and you ended up then doing something that you love. I always love those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for all of us to do that, because it's easy to, kind of get into one lane and just continue on doing something because we have been, and it's, easier, the path of least resistance. But sometimes changing paths and going with our passion, it's worth the risk in the end.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Absolutely. Well, there's lesson number 1 already.
We could go off on a whole other episode on that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So you said that sleep started to resonate with you because you were learning more about brain health. So I think maybe we sort of dive into that. So what is actually going on in the body when we sleep that's affecting our health in this powerful way?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that's happening that I found really interesting. And I think I mentioned to you before we started the episode, full disclosure that I'm not a doctor or scientist. So I like to try to describe things like how I learned it and, understand how, the everyday person may follow
Perfect.
along. So hopefully it will make sense. But the first thing is during sleep, our body is working to repair itself. And especially with the brain, the brain is cleansing itself when we sleep. So we want to make sure that we're giving our body enough time to actually perform this. And when we sleep, what we learned like during the day, our memories are getting cemented in our mind as well. So when we don't get enough sleep and the body doesn't have the time to repair itself and the brain to cleanse itself, that's when you're going to be more likely to find that you are maybe feeling confused, lack of judgment, forgetfulness, things like that, brain fog, right? We've all experienced. So all that will happen when we don't give ourselves enough sleep at night. So
Okay.
that's one of the things that the body's doing. Second is, and so we'll get into a little scientific here, but so T cells, which are white blood cells that help us fight infections. So when we don't get enough sleep, our T cell count goes down. And so that's when you're going to find that you're more susceptible to getting sick, getting different viruses, and also inflammation in the body goes up, which again makes you more likely to get something that you don't want to get. So that's happening. And then lastly, the other thing that I found really interesting was our hormones. Our body regulates our hormone production when we are asleep. So again, if we're not getting enough sleep, and this cannot happen, fully happen, this is when you might find it hard to regulate your emotions. You may have heightened stress, right? Lower mood, and also a higher risk of, feeling depressed as well. So kind of these three things together kind of shows that, you need to give your body enough time each night to do its thing. That's why when you don't, you wake up the next day feeling forgetful and moody and all of that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So all of those are really helpful. And it's interesting because I'm kind of thinking of like little stories about each of these. So the whole brain cleansing idea, I had always heard that, let's say you're studying for a test or something like that, and what should you do? Should you just stop at some point and say, I know enough, I got to get my sleep? Or should you keep studying? And I'd always heard you need to just stop. Like, what you know, get your sleep. And so this goes with what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you need to give your brain enough time to actually absorb the information that you just studied. Yes.
Yeah. And there's a cartoon movie that I can't think of the name of right now, unfortunately, where it's all these little characters that live inside a little girl's brain. And I always picture them like cataloging things into folders and putting things into different places and stuff. So listeners, if you know what that movie is, tell me in some way, because I can't think of the name of it. But anyway. Now that's what I'm going to picture.
Yes.
And then when I learned more about gut health recently, because I had an episode about gut health, and that was a pretty fascinating discussion, we were talking about inflammation. And so you brought up that if we are not sleeping and these T cell levels are getting lower, then potentially there's inflammation going on inside our bodies as well. And what she was talking about was that chronic inflammation, just the body's just always angry in a sense. And she was talking about how harmful that is to our overall health. So it sounds to me like those things go together, because if we can get enough sleep, maybe we can prevent some of that too.
Yes. And I love that you had that episode too, because actually, as I said, lifelong learner over here, I just enrolled in a gut health course because there is a huge gut brain connection. So I wanted to be able to increase my knowledge about the gut because it is so important for the brain health as well.
Yes. And you know what? Isn't that interesting? Because she and I were focusing a lot on what people eat and tweaks we could make and why do we care. And she alluded to the gut brain connection and talked about it a little bit, but we said, oh, we're going to have to come back to that more. So we're kind of doing that now, maybe.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm convinced I want to fight infection. I want lower inflammation. I want to remember what I learned. I want my hormones regulated. Those are all really important things. Now, I'm just curious, does it matter how much time we spend in different parts of the sleep cycle, or is it just the overall sleep that will help our body do all these things?
There's definitely recommended like percentages within each of the sleep stages. I know I have a Fitbit, there's so many other devices out there like that will give you a rough estimate. You have to take it for what they are. It's not going to give you 100%. But the interesting thing is, right, we hear about how we need 8 hours, right? We hear 7 to 8 hours. And for the most part, that is true. And if you get that, you're probably more than likely getting enough time in each stage. But for our deep sleep, a lot of that happens at the beginning of the sleep cycle. So, for example, say you had a really bad night and you only sleep 4 hours instead of 8. You're not technically losing out on 50% of the benefits of sleep. It's not exactly linear because especially like the first hour or so tends to be the most restful. So you're still getting, some of the good benefits, even if you don't get the full 8 hours. So even though we want to strive for the
Right.
7 to 8 hours, know that it's not exactly linear, and quantity doesn't always equal quality as well.
Yeah.
Right? So I like to say, aim for the 7 to 8, but again, kind of know yourself and kind of experiment, right? In seeing, if you got 8 hours one night, how am I feeling? How am I functioning? If you got 6 hours, kind of ask the same thing and see how you do. Because you need something that's going to work for you and your lifestyle too.
So that brings up a question, and I am aware that this would be just your opinion that I'm asking for. So listeners, I'm sure are aware of that too. But, some people say, oh, I only need 4 hours. I only need 5 hours and I'm functioning great. Is that likely true or probably not?
Based on my studies, I would say probably not. There is a very small percent of people, it's actually genetic, that it's called they could be like short sleepers. It's something like that. But with them, they can have a few hours less a night and perform a little bit better than the normal person. But they're still not functioning like at their best, right? So they may be a little less moody or forgetful, but not, 100%. So yeah, I would say if people say all they need is 4 hours a night, I don't know. I'd maybe question that. But again,
maybe they would be functioning better if they had more.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know that many people who claim that, but you hear that sometimes. So I was curious for sure.
Yeah. No. And that also reminds me of, again, when you're looking at how much sleep that you need, for yourself, mindset plays a big role, right? So if you're someone that is saying that, oh, I only need 4 hours, or, in the past, and I'll admit I was guilty of this, early on in my career, working a lot. And I was like, oh, I don't need sleep. There's too much to do, kind of like I'll sleep when I'm dead type of mentality, right? Then you're not gonna make sleep a priority, right? If you're not thinking it's important, you're not going to be making sure that you're getting your 8 hours a night. So, also checking in with your thoughts and beliefs around sleep as well.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I'm always talking about mindset on this podcast, because I do fully believe it. I mean, goodness, our mindset is running everything in our lives, every thought we have, every decision we make. So I'm glad that you bring that up. Yeah, I have definitely heard people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, whatever. And no, that's not ideal.
Yes, no, it is common. And like I said, my younger self was definitely had that mentality. But as I have learned, like, no, we need our sleep. And then, as we've
Yeah.
already talked about already, the importance of it. So.
We live in an online social media world. For me, it's having a landing page for this podcast, having a cool link in bio for my business Instagram, and having a resources website for my social selling team. Just having a place to put information, links, recommendations, and even celebration. I was thrilled when I found Boss Lady Bio. You can create a website that looks gorgeous, and you don't have to know how to code. Have a look at what they offer at omgteachme.onamission.bio. You can even try it for free. Now, what do you think about the body's resilience if we have maybe 1 or 2 nights of hardly any sleep or terrible sleep? I find that our bodies, when I talk to experts about various health-related topics, our bodies usually are pretty resilient to make up for kind of the odd poor meal or the odd maybe poor night of sleep. Would you agree with that it's pretty easy to recover from that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to just try to get back on track, right? And that, especially comes into play when you travel too, right? I had the opportunity a few months ago to go to Hawaii. And so that was about a 6-hour time difference, for me. So I was jumping multiple time zones. And when you do things like that, it's obviously going to, screw up your sleep schedule. So it's, trying to get, back on track and try to go with, depending on how long you're away. If it's a short trip, you may not want to adjust to their time zone. You want to try to keep more your own. But if it's a longer period of time, try to get into their time zone as quickly as possible so that you get into your rhythm
right
as quickly as possible. So
Right. That's good advice for sure. Yeah, we're all traveling again now after maybe a year or 2 of not traveling. So
right.
Good advice.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So then if you're somebody who's a great sleeper, which I confess I am, I sleep like a rock, you're probably thinking, oh, this all sounds good. I'm going to do my sleep. It's going to be great. And if you're somebody who really has trouble falling asleep at night or has trouble staying asleep at night, you're thinking, this is really frustrating because I now know why I need to do it, but I can't do it. So what advice do you have for people who struggle with sleep, either falling asleep or staying asleep?
Yes, I have lots of good tips, but I'll preface it with saying, so we're all individual, right? Bio-individual people. What is going to work for one person may or may not work for someone else. So I don't want people to get discouraged, right? If they try something and it's not working for them and their friend or family member, it worked wonderful for, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that we're all different and something may work for them that doesn't work for someone else. So what I like to tell people is listen to some of the things that we'll mention today. What, if anything, sounds good, try it. If it doesn't work, throw it out, try something else. It really is kind of one big experiment. So just know that there's nothing wrong with you if it doesn't work. You'll find something that will. But one of the things that I really like is creating a pre-sleep ritual. So what this could look like is setting an alarm for about an hour before you go to bed so that we remember, like, okay, we need to start slowing down, getting ready for bed. We want to avoid electronic screens. I'm sure we've all heard of like the blue light, right? We want to get away from those, and also anything stressful. So some examples of that is we don't want to be checking our work email or being sucked into the drama on social media, right?
Good point.
Anything that's going to rile us up, we don't want to do that. We want to, focus on things that are calming and going to relax us. So that could be like a meditation, reading a book, taking a hot bath or shower, which that is also something really interesting is temperature. So a decrease in temperature usually tells the body that it is time to sleep. This goes kind of like historic, like when we were, having to maybe live outside or whatever. When the temperature went down, it kind of signaled that it was time to sleep. So what you can do is if you take a hot shower and then you cool off, you're kind of tricking the body into thinking that it's time to sleep. So that could be something that might work for you.
That's new. I hadn't heard that before. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also one of my favorites is to write down like your thoughts and, anything you're feeling before bed. So you might have, a journal next to your bed where you write down what you're thinking, before you turn off the lights. And this is really just to get it off the top of your mind. And I say it's like putting a pin in it. So we're not, forgetting about it. We can address it tomorrow, but there's no reason for us to be, thinking about it and stressing about it while we're trying to sleep. So, and a lot of times by writing it down, that will help us kind of, get it out of the forefront of our mind. So that's one I like as well. And then lastly, just your environment, right? So again, talking about the lighting, it's more of orange, red spectrum lighting at night. And then we want to make sure that our room is as dark as possible, like to our comfort level. So whether that is getting good curtains that's going to block out the light or, a sleep mask, something like that. Also, again, with the temperature. So, setting the temperature as something that's going to work for you. Again, most people find cooler temperatures work. I think we all like to cuddle under the blankets, right?
Right.
And then also adjusting the noise level. So if we think about that, again, our environment, right? So I'll use the example of if you're in a college dorm, right? You're probably having people coming and going, could be all night, who knows, right? Talking, laughing. So you're going to maybe want some white noise to drown that out. But on the other hand, if you live in the country and it's very quiet, it may be too quiet for you. So having a fan, or I know I have an air purifier that makes a little noise in my room. So it's just not completely quiet. So again, it's kind of thinking about what works best for you. And do you need a little more noise or do you need a little less? And compensating that way. So that's another tip as well to fall asleep.
So, okay, I love all of these. And it's interesting because only a couple weeks ago did I realize I was reading an article about how your room needs to be totally dark. And I like that you said as dark as you're comfortable with, because let's be realistic, maybe we're not totally comfortable with that. But I realized I've taken these airplane trips where I've gotten sleep masks and I've never, ever tried them. And so I should really try. Maybe that's the solution.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And if you're able to fall asleep on a plane, please let me know your tips because that's one place that I can never fall asleep.
Yes, listeners, tell us. I am not the greatest plane sleeper either, but if I travel for work, then I can travel in business. And when you can get a better seating arrangement, it's better, let me tell you. But sleeping in a regular airplane seat, no.
Yeah, right. I know. Try to get comfortable with no leg room, right?
Yeah, it's a little tricky.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, I bet you that this gives somebody something new to try for sure. And then what about kind of waking up at night, struggling to go back to sleep? Would you say similar things for them or do you have some other thoughts?
Yeah, so if you find yourself waking up, first, I want everyone to know that it's perfectly normal. So don't stress out. I think we start to worry, why am I waking up? What's wrong with me? It happens to everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean anything wrong unless it's, happening maybe all the time. But just try to relax, whatever that means to you, doing doing some deep breathing exercises, maybe a small meditation if you're into meditating, but something that's just going to get you to relax. Also, I know this can be very hard, but don't try not to check the clock.
Oh,
because that's probably going to make us more stressed out, right? If you look, you're like, oh no, I only have 2 more hours before I have to get up for work. And, if I fall asleep now, I'll get another hour, whatever
right.
it is we start talking about. So try not to look at the clock because that's going to more likely than not stress you out more. And if you find yourself really fully awake, try to do something productive like reading a book, right? Until you feel sleepy again. I've heard of other people too. They said it's going into another room, right? So getting up and leaving the bedroom, say going into the living room until you feel sleepy again, and then coming back into the bedroom. So it kind of depends on if you wake up, how awake you're actually feeling,
Right.
and go from there. But yeah, just try to relax, I would say, as best you can.
That's interesting because my husband wakes up more at night than I do for sure. And sometimes he'll go do something else and leave. And I always thought maybe that wasn't the best idea, but maybe he's on to something sometimes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, if it works for him. And, just not to go off on a tangent, but when you just mentioned that, it reminded me, it was funny in my studies I was reading about in surveys, women, it was talking about when you have partner in the bed with you, and women will report that they don't get as good a sleep and men will report the opposite. But when they actually did sleep studies, the reverse was true. So,
Oh, that is interesting.
yes.
So we think as women that we're not getting as good a sleep if we're not by ourselves, but the opposite is true.
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
well, that's a nice little bit of trivia there.
Yeah. So it's kind of brings to the point, right? It's like what we're necessarily thinking in our head is not exactly what's happening, right? And that's why, especially people with insomnia, and they think that they're never going to sleep or they're not sleeping at all. Sometimes they actually are getting some sleep during the night, but they don't realize it. So
Right. Good point. Yeah. And I understand what you're saying about relaxing too, because when we feel like we're stuck in this I can't go to sleep thing, it's going to only just create more stress. It's like the opposite of relaxing.
yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we've
Okay.
all probably experienced that at some point and can relate to starting
Absolutely.
conversation in the head, right? Talking to ourselves like, oh no, I need to get to sleep.
Yeah. Well, these are good. And I'll tell you the one that surprised me the most is not looking at the clock, just those little details. And so thank you for that. So tell us, what other resources are there that you would direct people to who might want to learn more or are having some struggles with sleep, and how could they connect with you also?
Yeah, I try to put out a lot of content around sleep, specifically doing some blogs, and will continue. So I would love for people to go to my website, which is www.sherrytrip.com. I know I spell Sherry a little bit differently than most people, so I know you'll probably have that in the show notes.
I will, yes.
So they can get there. But definitely would love for you listeners to check out my blogs there. And on social media at Sherry Trip, I did a lot of my studies through Dr. Amen. I know he has some books out. Again, his is going to be more about brain health overall, but sleep is a part of that. So regardless, definitely recommend his books. He has lots of great information as well.
Perfect. I'm always interested. I'm always kind of reading slowly through something where I'm learning something new. So I'm going to have a look at that too.
Yes, definitely. So many good books out there. I'm always at the library getting a new book out to read.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so the last question is the question I ask every guest, and that is, if you're having a day when you need to put yourself in a good mood, you need to kind of raise your vibration, I might say, what is your favorite song to do that?
Yes, so I really like the song Unstoppable by Sia. I think that's a really good song if you're working out or before, you're doing something new and you need the confidence, or to just like get yourself going. Like you said, get yourself in a good mood. It's like, I just find it to be a really positive song, and it has a really good beat to it as well. So that's always my go-to.
I love that song. I love that you said that. That is absolutely one of my favorites. And yes, we will have that on the playlist. The playlist is on Spotify. So I'll put the link in the show notes as I always do, but just look for a playlist called Mood Lift and you will see it, all the listener and guest recommendations. So thank you for that. I love that one.
Yes.
And I think that everybody who's listened to this is going to have learned something, because I did not know all the behind the scenes of why we need to sleep and what's going on in our body. And I didn't think of all the tips that you provided. You surprised me with a couple of them. So I know that's going to be true of our listeners. So I really appreciate that. And I'm glad you could join me today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I had a great time and hope that your listeners learn something new. And if they have any questions at all, please feel free to always reach out. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or send someone in the right direction if I'm not the right person.
Perfect. And I have actually taken a look at your website and read some of your articles, and I really liked them. So thank you for that.
Oh, good. Awesome. Glad to hear that.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, leave a review, or take a screenshot and share on your social media. Let's get this message out further into the world. Now it's time to head down to the show notes to see the resources I mentioned. We may not have learned this before, but it sure is powerful now.